Hello, today's lesson we'll be learning how to use multiplication as scaling. Before we get started, it would be helpful if you had a pencil, some scratch paper, an eraser, and a partner maybe to help you today while we partner talk. And don't forget, you can always pause the video and go back to parts of the video that you need to review. If I asked you to scale a number, what would you do? Go ahead and pause and talk with someone near you or write down your ideas. When you're ready, you can come back to the video. When you're scaling a number, you're resizing a number when you multiply it by a fraction. We'll look a little more closely at what that looks like in today's lesson, because today we are learning how to use multiplication as scaling. I'd like for you now to write down your level of understanding on this objective before we get started. We'll come back to this at the end to see if your level of understanding has increased. As a review, we can multiply mixed numbers by writing them as improper fractions, and then we'd multiply as we would with normal fractions. As a reminder, and to understand our big idea for today, it's important to know that scaling is the process of resizing a number when you multiply by a fraction that is greater than or less than 1. Let me show you some examples. Let's multiply the number 2 by 3 fractions that are greater than 1. 2 times 1 1/5 is equal to 2 2/5. 2 times 1 1/2 is equal to 3. And 2 times 1 3/4 is equal to 3 1/2. All of these products are greater than the whole number 2. Now let's take a look here and multiply the number 2 by 3 fractions that are less than 1. 2 times 1 1/4 is 1/2. 2 times 1/2 is 1, and 2 times 5/8 is 1 1/4. In these examples, the products are all less than the whole number 2. So we can say that multiplying a number by a fraction that is greater than 1 results in a product that is greater than that whole number. When we multiply a number by a fraction that is less than 1, then we can say that the product is less than that whole number. We can use inequalities to compare numbers, which we were doing earlier with whole numbers and those fractions. We can multiply fractions and whole numbers, and we can multiply mixed fractions. This is the success criteria that's going to help us today as we answer a few questions. So let me show you how we're going to use that big idea to help us answer these questions. We need to determine if the product would be greater or less than the whole number, and we're not going to multiply. So I have to ask myself, is the fraction that we're multiplying with less than 1 or greater than 1? In this example, the fraction is less than 1. So I know my product is going to be less than 1. In order to complete this, we're going to follow 2 steps today. We're going to determine if the fraction is less than 1 or greater than 1. And then that'll help us determine if the product will be greater or less than the whole number, because we'll be looking at the fraction. Let me show you one more example. 10 times 1 1/8. Well, the fraction that I'm multiplying with is greater than 1. So I know my product is also going to be greater than 1. Let's go ahead and go through some of these together. 1 3/4 times 4. If you want to pause and answer it on your own, you can go ahead and do that and then see if you got the right answer as we go through these, or you can follow along with me. The fraction is greater than 1, so I know that my product will also be greater. 12 times 5 6. The fraction is less than 1, so I know my product is going to be less than 1. 1 1/3 times 2. 1 1/3 is greater than 1, so I know my product will also be greater than 1. 8 times 4/5. Well, 4/5 is less than 1, so I know my product will also be less than 1. What was our learning objective for today? Today, we learned how to use multiplication as scaling. Go ahead and write down your level of understanding after today's lesson. Did you increase a little bit? Are you in the same spot? You can always go back to the video to review. I want to ask you one more question. Why would the product of 3 over 2 and 3/4 be greater than 3/4? You can go ahead and pause and answer the question, or listen to the explanation. 3 over 2 is the same as saying 1 and 1/2. And since 1 1/2 is greater than 1, I know my product would be greater than 1. Taking a look at these, which one does not belong based on scaling? If you take a look closely, you'll see some commonalities. All the fractions here are less than 1, except for this one, the 1 1/2. So I know that one doesn't belong because 1 1/2 is greater than 1. All of the other products of the fractions that are less than 1 will also be less than the whole number. Thank you so much for following along. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see more videos.